All right, we are looking ahead to a Thanksgiving entertainment staple, the National Dog Show. The Kennel Club of Philadelphia has presented dog shows for more than 125 years. The show will air on WDTN tomorrow at noon, and someone from right here in the Miami Valley plays a key role in the dog show. There's always a Miami Valley connection. Vicki Seiler-Cushman is a Xenia local and a judge with the American Kennel Club. Thank you so much for joining us here, Vicki, and
thank you for having me.
Taking the time for us. We'll start with, because I think the average person wants to know, how do you get involved in this? How did you enter the world of dog shows?
Well, my parents, my mother, had show dogs, and so that's how I first became involved. It was because I tagged along to the dog shows with her, and then just continued on and continued my education in dogs. It's been 50 years now, and so now I just work to continue my education and become a better judge.
Yeah, you grew up with it, so you started off very young. You've also handled dogs to Best in Show in all 7 groups, winning more than 200 Best in Show. So what's the key to taking home the Best in Show win as we all get ready to watch tomorrow?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is to pick really good dogs to show. People would always say to me, what kind of dogs do you show? And I would say, good ones.
That's a great answer.
So just starting with, one that fits the standard, and then doing everything that you can to help it to win. So like making its hair perfect and making its body in shape and keeping its mind strong.
And you know what?
Then giving it that little razzle dazzle.
Not too far off from what we have to do as people, is what it sounds like. So that's very interesting. We have Vicki Seiler-Cushman here. She's a judge with the American Kennel Club. You might see her tomorrow on TV. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brooke.
We're continuing our coverage as the EPA orders a search for toxic chemicals in East Palestine. Both Ohio senators sent a letter to the EPA expressing concerns that toxic substances called dioxins may have been released when derailed cars carrying vinyl chloride were deliberately burned. Now the EPA says they have ordered the rail company Norfolk Southern to test for dioxins. Joining us now to explain dioxins and the health impact they can have is Dr. E. Ronald Hale, Kettering Health's Medical Director for Radiation Oncology. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the first question here. What are dioxins?
Dioxins can be thought of as kind of a pesky family of chemicals that are sometimes called persistent organic pollutants, POPs, POPs. And they really have no use of their own, but they can cause major health problems in both humans and animals. One common dioxin that you might have heard of before are called PCBs. So they're fairly common. More than 90% of the exposure that humans have to dioxins is thought to be through food. You can also be exposed through an industrial accident or workplace contamination or water. And for children, babies can be contaminated through the passage of dioxins in breast milk.
All right, we have about 30 seconds left, Dr. Hale. If residents near the derailment were exposed to dioxins, what sort of health impacts would you expect to see?
So there are immediate and late impacts. The immediate ones oftentimes can be a rash on the skin called chloracne, darkening of the skin, but it's the long-term implications that are worrisome. Lots of diseases associated with dioxin exposure, from cancer, heart disease, diabetes, immune system problems. There's a multitude of problems that can arise much later than the exposure.
Which explains the concern for all the residents there in East Palestine. Dr. E. Ronald Hale, Kettering Health's Medical Director for Radiation Oncology. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Social media companies are coming under fire for their role in the youth mental health crisis. Just last week, a public school district in Seattle filed a lawsuit seeking to hold the big tech giants behind TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, YouTube, and Snapchat accountable for a public nuisance by targeting their products to children. Brooke has more about how the social media impacts our kids' mental health. Brooke?
Yeah, I'm joined now by Colleen Oakes, the manager of the Montgomery County Prevention Coalition. Colleen, thank you for joining us here tonight. We're going to start with mental health, the mental health crisis that is facing young people. What are these kids up against right now?
Yeah, we are in nothing short of a mental health crisis for our youth. Dayton Children says that the #1 reason for hospital admittances is suicidal ideation. And I've seen school surveys that show anywhere from 17 to 19% of our kids are saying they're seriously considering suicide. So we have a lot of work to do.
And so we now work to zero in on what is causing this, because you need to know the why, and that's why we start talking about kids and social media. So what is the impact that social media and these apps might be having? What's the correlation here?
Yeah, so a lot of different factors impact our mental health. We certainly think that social media has an impact on that. We see an increase in bullying for people that use social media, a lower self-image for people that use social media, as well as a sort of skewed social status for those that are on social media.
You know, and unfortunately we do also know that there is maybe an addiction element to being on social media as well. So telling yourself, okay, I need to get away from this thing that's not healthy for me is difficult even for adults to do.
Absolutely.
So what should parents be doing if their kids are on social media and they are using these apps?
Yeah, so the Montgomery County Prevention Coalition has an awesome resource. It's called Digital Detox 101. So people can head to digitaldetox101.org. We have a lot of information on the brain science behind addiction and dependency, and then tips and tricks on what parents can do for their kids.
So there's the preventative side of things, but then what can parents do if they're kind of on the other end of this, where they can tell social media is negatively impacting their child?
Yeah, so first of all, as parents, we can be off our phones and we can be off of social media. So if we can model that for our kids, that's helpful. I also love seeing when families do tech-free outings. So maybe at dinner, we all put our phones away.
We're continuing to cover NASA's Artemis 1 space mission, which actually concluded yesterday. The uncrewed Orion capsule splashing down in the Pacific Ocean just off the west coast of the Baja Peninsula at 12:40 Sunday. There it is. That capped off the spacecraft's 1.4 million mile flight that lasted nearly 26 days. Splash. Orion's splashdown coinciding with the 50th anniversary of the last time astronauts landed on the moon. That was during the Apollo 17 mission. NASA plans to return astronauts to the moon in future Artemis missions. But let's talk about this mission, and joining us to talk about this one and the next steps is Randy ECKMAN. You've seen him here before, trajectory analyst at NASA's Johnson Space Center, who worked on Artemis 1, and a Huber Heights native. Welcome back to 5 on 2. I got to ask you right off the jump, how does it feel now that the mission's over?
Oh, it's such a relief. I was so happy to see it splashing down and seeing it splash down upright, for that matter, and knowing that everything ended up being a tremendous success. We've learned a lot along the way, and we're going to continue learning more as we continue forward with our journey back to the moon.
You know, Randy, there were numerous delays at the beginning. It seemed like it was lasting forever until Artemis could take off. Everyone wanted to know, is this mission going to pay off? Now that it is over, how did the mission go?
I think it was an incredible success. Our main mission priority was really to test out the heat shield, and that's what we demonstrated yesterday. So we showed that the vehicle was able to survive that really high speed reentry and do it with this, what we call the skip entry as well. All these are really new techniques that had never been tried before. They'd been talked about back in the 60s. For the original Apollo missions, but this is the first time that we've ever actually done it, and that's the thing that we're going to need if we're going to have crew coming back on some of these future ambitious missions we're looking at. We need to make sure we can get them back safely, and we demonstrated yesterday that we can do that. So I think that alone was a huge success, but we've learned a lot about the vehicle and flying to the moon in general over the last few days.
I'll tell you what, some of those pictures that it sent back, Rainy, were just amazing. 270,000 miles away from Earth. That's the furthest that any spacecraft designed for humans has ever gone before. I realize it's going to take time to go through all the data, but what do we know so far about how the capsule held up and whether it's ready and safe for humans?
We've learned a lot about how the hardware functions in space, and so yeah, there's a few things that we're going to have to go back and revisit. Look at the data that we got, like you said. But you know, overall, the vehicle was behaving so well that about halfway through the mission, you know, the management team came to us and said, you know, if we have opportunities to do even more experiments than what we already even had planned. Everything was going so well that we actually added more experiments to the timeline that we somewhat improvised on the fly to try to test things out ahead of putting people on the next mission. And I think a lot of those activities as well were extraordinarily successful. So we had a crew member that talked to us yesterday at the splashdown celebration, and he was saying that some of his crew members already were confident enough in our team that they would have felt comfortable getting on this flight, but definitely this has given them the confidence that the astronauts are going to be 100% ready to get on strap into the rocket when we're ready to do Artemis 2 in a couple years.
Randy, we cannot wait to see what comes up next. We've really enjoyed it and are grateful that you've joined us to help us understand this a little bit more over the several visits you've had with us, and we look forward to talking to you as well in the future. Randy ECKMAN, a good old boy from right here in the Miami Valley, Huber Heights, trajectory analyst at NASA's Johnson Space Center. Thank you so much for your time, Randy. It is just after 12:30 a.m. in Ukraine, marking 1 year since Russia launched its invasion into that country. That war has killed tens of thousands of people on both sides, forced millions of people from their homes, and has left many cities across the country in shambles. Tonight, we're hearing firsthand from a Ukrainian-American student. Brooke continues our coverage on the anniversary of Russia's invasion.
Well, joining us now to share her perspective on the war is Abigail Rist. She's from Kyiv and a senior studying international relations at Cedarville University. Abigail, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.
So as we mentioned, tomorrow will mark 1 year since Russia launched its invasion into Ukraine. And for the people you know there, how have their lives changed over the last year?
All of a sudden, you have to decide how you are going to live every hour of every day, because you don't know if a bomb's coming or if your friends are safe or if you can send your kids to school that day or not. And so life has changed drastically for many of my friends, but they are resilient, they are strong, and they are continuing to live, because that is the best way to fight Putin right now.
And that's just not something that we have experience with here in the U.S. What has your experience been like then, studying here in the United States as the war's going on in Ukraine?
My world feels very torn. I mean, I have my U.S. friends, my U.S. professors and classes, and everything is peaceful. I go to bed and there are no bombs flying, and I don't have to run to a bomb shelter every few minutes. I have stable electricity, whereas my friends back home don't. And so at the end of the day, I go back to my room and I check in on them. And the best way to say I love you is to text them and say, how are you today? And they're honest, and they say today was a good day or today was a hard day.
I can understand that. I think it's hard too when we're simply getting footage from that area. It's hard to really tell what's going on there. So among the Ukrainian people that you know, what is your sense of how they're feeling about this war now that we're a year in?
They're definitely tired. They're very tired, but they're going to fight. They're not going to give up their sovereignty. They're going to make sure that their kids and their grandkids can go to school, can have a sovereign nation, and can speak the Ukrainian language moving forward.
You're majoring in international relations at Cedarville University, so do your studies influence your understanding of this war?
To some extent, this war is a simple war. Russia invaded Ukraine. To another extent, there's a lot of history behind that, and this is a huge geopolitical move and faux pas on Russia's part, and studying international relations helps me understand just the complexities behind it and helps me appreciate some of the decisions world leaders have made pertaining to all of this.
I feel like many of us are learning about the relationship as this is going on. What do you make of the support that you've seen for Ukraine here in the U.S.?
It is really heartening to see everybody come around Ukrainians to provide refugees with new friendships and homes, and just support the country even though people are so far away.
Abigail, lastly, I want to ask, is there anything about the situation in Ukraine that you wish people had a better understanding of?
I really do wish people would understand that the people who are dying over there are people, not faces, and that every day is a struggle, and people are doing the best that they can.
Yeah, we've certainly been monitoring this every step of the way. Abigail Rist, thank you so much for joining us. She's a senior international relations student at Cedarville University. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.